Hi, my name is Joe Clark, and today we're going to be looking at VMware PKS and the solution components that are involved with the solution. What we've got written out here on the board already is something almost all vSphere administrators are familiar with. We've got vSphere from a hypervisor and management perspective, physical storage, and physical network that touches the hypervisor. What we're going to do from here is we're going to layer forward what PKS brings to the solution on top and what those components are and what they do. So on top of vSphere, one of the first things that we end up seeing is software-defined networking for containers in the form of NSXT. And what NSXT really brings is a couple different things. It brings the network container plugin for container architectures so that there is a native interface for networking for containers in the infrastructure as it stood up. We also see that there's software-defined networking that's brought up, and as a result of that, we can actually provision out new networks automatically in software with NSXT that is consumed as a function of PKS. And finally, we see network security, which allows us to bring in any sort of firewall rules or place, policies that we need to have placed from a network perspective inside of NSXT. Now, what gets layered on top of that is an open source component known as Bosch. And Bosch is an open source software that's completely managed as a part of the PKS solution that is responsible for provisioning Kubernetes clusters. And it's not just responsible for provisioning Kubernetes clusters, it's responsible for provisioning them and maintaining their life cycle. And as a part of every single Kubernetes cluster that's stood up, we see that there's etcd nodes, which is a distributed key value store. We have master nodes and we have worker nodes. So we have etcd, masters, and workers in every single one. And we may see more nodes built out as is required for the solution. And Bosch does a fantastic job of provisioning those workloads and allowing you to actually provision separate Kubernetes environments for different projects. And that's carved up typically as your infrastructure would see fit or as your project teams work within your organization. Another one of the key components that we have is Harbor, which is actually the container registry, which fulfills the role of a container storage place so that container images can be pulled and pushed at will from development teams as they're working into the environment and then pulled as they are run in Kubernetes environments and deployed. We also have the Google service proxy, which allows us to effectively expose Google native cloud services in GCP to our PKS cluster. And what we have pretty much over the entire thing is the PKS control plane, which is then responsible for managing the provisioning of Bosch, the GCP service provider, Harbor, and the Kubernetes clusters likewise. This is sort of that control plane that is in charge of ensuring that all of these things remain in sync. And if we look at what this sort of brings to bear, this brings to bear a bunch of different things. And it actually brings together what we kind of hinted at earlier with NSXT with some new things that we need to watch out for. There are some new things, but there are also some familiar things. And VMware actually, as a part of this, has addressed part of the operational aspect of how we move forward with a solution like this. So if we look at what's actually included in vRealize, there's a number of different tools here that actually allow us to manage and operate this environment seamlessly, such as vRealize Network Insight, plugging into NSXT and showing us net flows for all the traffic for the containers, such as vRealize Log Insight, which allows us to see logging information from our containers. Any of our standard error, standard out logs that we might need to pipe in from our container workloads, we can pull in. And then, of course, vRealize Operations Manager, which allows us to maintain our vSphere storage and network from a hypervisor and platform perspective. Now, on top of this, there's some new technologies that have come out that are really focused on the container specific, because vRealize, as we mentioned, is focused on the platform, network security, logging, and Wavefront is a new VMware monitoring solution that allows, it's more for cloud native application monitoring specific. And this is a part of the solution that has come up that just does a fantastic job of making sure operationally you can control your entire environment. And so one of the questions that I get often is, what all of this is included with PKS? And the answer is pretty much anything right here in the green. Anything right here in the green is included with PKS as a part of the solution. So if you do want to add on vRealize components, that would be something that you would add on, and obviously your platform is something else that you would be looking at as well. So when we look at the architecture, we see that we have the ability to monitor, provision, and maintain container infrastructure simply on-prem. And what does this really end up getting us at the end of the day? This gives us an environment with native Kubernetes that is pulled downstream that we can access. It gives us lifecycle management, not only for the platform, but for the container platforms, and Kubernetes itself is actually managed and maintained with controlled versions. It gives us a platform of vSphere as well as GCP as viable choices to deploy PKS. And finally, it gives us NetSec controls and insight into our architecture. And that is an overview of the PKS architecture and the components involved. Thanks for watching.